All right, I need you to have out your packet of notes. On the bottom of the packet of notes, it's going to say on page 77. We're going to be using 77 and 78 today, and it's section 2.4, the skills practice. You may run out of room on a few of these, so you may want to decide just to do this on notebook paper. We're going to be going over homework 8 today. This will also help you on homework 7. And the next time we have a quiz will be this coming Thursday. So we'll have plenty of time to do homework questions before any of this homework is due. So what we did Friday is we talked about this new formula, y minus y1 is m times x minus x1, and that's called the point slope formula. And that is a way when you don't have many fractions, it's most of the time the best way to get your equation. However, if your problem has a lot of fractions in it, probably don't want to mess with it. However, sometimes you get a case where you don't want to use this at all and you want to revert back to slope-intercept form. And 18 and 19 are two problems that are exactly the type where you don't really want to use this right here, and I'll show you why. Now on the homework, this is like problem number 33. Now, the reason why you don't want to do this y minus y1 formula is because you already know what b is. The y-intercept is -6. Here, the y-intercept is 5. You already know what b is. So what we're going to do in both of these problems is just use y equals mx plus b. And the issue is we don't know the slope, so we have to figure that out. So last week we learned that the way that you find an x-intercept is that you let y be 0. So, and then the y-intercept is when x is 0. So they don't come out and tell you this, but you've really got 2 points. If the x-intercept is 2, you really have the point 2 comma 0. And if the y-intercept is -6, you really have the point 0, -6. And so you can easily do slope formula on that. So there's x and y. That's x and y. That's the first point. That's the second point. And we can easily do the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to do -6, subtract 0, and then we're going to do 0, subtract 2. And the arithmetic here is pretty simple, and we get the slope is 3. So since I know what the slope is, and I already know what b is, you go right to the answer. And so you'll say the answer is y equals 3x minus 6. So we don't have to use that new formula from Friday. Now 19 has a fraction in it, no big deal. If the x-intercept is 5/2, we know y is 0. And if the y-intercept is 5, we know x is 0. So I do the slope again, y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1, and so we have 5 over -5/2. Now, if you don't have a calculator, remember dividing by -5/2 means you multiply by the reciprocal. And so 5 means 5 over 1. So that's 10 over -5, which is -2. So here again, we already knew what the y-intercept was. We had b being 5, and then you just figured out the slope was -2. So using y equals mx plus b, you've got the slope is -2, y-intercept is 5. So that's how you're going to do problem 33 in the homework, and you'll notice it's not that hard. All right, the second type of problem we've got to learn how to do is when they don't just come out and give you the y-intercept. Um, 16 and 17 here, this is kind of like number 31 on the homework. They give you 2 points again, but obviously not the y-intercept. So what we do is we start out and we got to figure the slope. So we've got x and y, first and second. So that's going to be y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. The minus a minus is plus a plus, minus a minus is plus a plus. So we get 3 over negative 2, or negative 3 halves. And so it's at this point, you've got to make a decision on which formulas that you want to use. So I'm going to call this method 1. What if you just went ahead and used the formula that I taught y'all Friday? Y minus y1 is m times x minus x1. Okay, you could. You know the slope. It's negative 3 halves. And then you pick a point. Doesn't matter which point. I'm going to use negative 1, negative 2. And that point is your x1 and y1 if you use this formula. So you would say y subtract whatever y1 is, that's negative 2, equals the slope, which is negative 3 halves, times x minus, and this says write down whatever x1 is, which is negative 1. Okay, minus a minus is a plus, and then minus a minus is a plus. So that's considered point slope form. But on the homework and on the test, that's not really what they're asking for here. They want slope intercept form. So, if this was a whole number here for the slope, this isn't that big of a deal, but you've got to distribute and then move some stuff around. So if it's a fraction, it's a little harder. Negative 3 halves times x is negative 3 halves x. Negative 3 halves times 1 is negative 3 halves. Then you got to move the 2 over. And then you use your calculator to add those fractions. Or if you don't have a calculator, what you'd have to do is consider 2 is really 2 over 1. And to do the fractions, you need common denominators. So that needs a 2, and that needs a 2. So that's minus 4 halves. So your answer would be negative 3 halves x minus 7 halves. So, you could do it that way, but you'll notice when there's a lot of fractions involved, it gets kind of ugly. So we may want to instead do it by a second method, and this is the way, for y'all that had Miss Thomas, she would have taught it last year, and if you had Miss Harwell or even me as a freshman, you would have done it this way as well. And we'll just go ahead and use y equals mx plus b. Now, we just figured out the slope was negative 3 halves. We did that when we did the slope formula. So I already know half the answer. If I was wanting to just do the answer, I know it's negative 3 halves x, and then it's either plus something or a minus something. I just don't know yet. So what you could do is figure b out. Now the way you find b is you take the point, and I'm going to use negative 1, negative 2 again, plug that into x and y. So plug negative 2 in for y, negative 3 halves into x, and then negative 1 into y right there. Well, negative times a negative makes that a positive. Now, if you have a calculator, you would just move the fraction over and be done with it. But if you don't have a calculator, you would multiply everything by 2 in order to get rid of that fraction right there. Then you would move the 3 over. Divide by 2. And you get b is negative 7 halves. So now you have the rest of your answer. You now know what b is, so you put negative 7 halves there. So, you get the same answer either way. It doesn't really matter to me which way you do it. But, you have two choices. You can do y minus y1 is m times x minus x1, or you can do y equals mx plus b. Just do it one way or the other. I don't really care. All right, so as of now, then you can do two of the problems on the homework. The third problem I'm going to show you how to do is what do you do if it says parallel or perpendicular? Now, I'm going to change this problem a little bit. This is like 35, but we're going to change this to parallel because that's what the homework problem says. Well, we learned last week that when you have your equation y by itself, that is in what's called slope-intercept method. And we learned that when y is by itself, the slope is the number in front of x, which in this case is negative 1/3. And then what did we learn about parallel lines? Well, we learned parallel lines have the same slope. So what we're going to do in this particular problem then is we're going to say, okay, the slope is negative 1/3, and then we're going to use the point 3, negative 1. And so it's at this point you've got to decide which method you want to do to get your answer. Now, if you do the method I showed you Friday, we would use this formula, and we'd put that into x1 and y1. So I would say y minus y1 is the slope times x minus x1, this number here, 3. Minus a minus is a plus. But here you're going to notice the fraction's not that big of a deal, because when you say 1/3 times that x right here, we can easily do that. But when you do negative 1/3 times negative 3, well, right here, negative 3 is really negative 3 over 1. So you've got a negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 1 is 3, and that is 1, positive 1. So the fractions end up not being a big deal. And then when you move the positive 1 over, changes to a negative when you move that 1 over. And so you get negative 1/3 x, and that's just the answer. This one is an odd one, weird one, because your b ended up being 0 when you work it out because there's nothing there. Now, if you're not getting this new method about doing the y minus y1 stuff, you can always revert back to method 2. On method 2, you would say, here's the slope, and here's the point, and you would just do y equals mx plus b, and you would just figure out what b is. You'd find b by plugging that into x and that into y. So you plug negative 1 into y, negative 1/3 into slope, 3 into x, and you figure b out. Well, here the 3's cancel, and then when you move the negative 1 over, you get b as 0. You already knew the slope, so for your answer, you do y equals mx plus b. The slope was negative 1/3, and b is 0, and that's just your answer. And honestly, sometimes mx plus b is the easiest way to do it. Sometimes point slope formula, the y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Sometimes it's the easiest way. It just really depends on the problem. All right, 37 is on the homework. It is a challenge problem. I want you to see if you can figure it out, but I'm not going over that one. So I want to see if you can figure it out on your own. All right, some miscellaneous problems here then. This is not on the handout anywhere. You need to just write this down on notebook paper or find somewhere to do it. You're going to be asked to do 41 through 43. And they give you this formula here about the number of degrees in a convex polygon. Okay, you may have forgotten from geometry, but you remember how a triangle has 3 sides, and you know that adds up to 180. And then on a triangle, it has 4 sides, and we know that it adds up to 360. But then when you get to, say, a pentagon or say you have an octagon. An octagon has 8 sides. And what you may remember from geometry is if you connect the points from one vertex to the other vertices, you can make, like in this one, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I missed one. You can make 6 triangles, and then 6 times 180 would be 1080. Yeah, 1080 degrees. And so in geometry, you had this formula that was n minus 2 times 180 gave you how much all the angles add up to equal. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to memorize that for this, but they give you this problem where you're using the angles of a polygon, and they are nice, and they give you the formula. So the question says, write this in slope-intercept form. All right, well, you're thinking slope-intercept form is going to be y equals mx plus b, but we don't have a y, we don't have an x. Well, what you have to do is get it where it's mc plus b. Notice how this has d by itself? Well, see, that's your y, and your c right here, that's your x. So that should be pretty easy. Just distribute it, and you got your answer. And then the slope and y, in this case, the d-intercept, no big deal. And then define the number of degrees in a pentagon. Well, remember, hexagon is 6 sides. If I want to do it for 6 sides, I just plug 6 in here and say 180 times 6 minus 2. If I was doing a decagon that has 10 sides, I just plug 10 in here, and it'd be 180 times 10 minus 2. So you can do the math and figure out pentagon. Shouldn't be that hard. So that's how you do 41 through 43. So just multiply that out to get 41. The slope and the d-intercept's pretty easy. Just remember, like, if I had r equals 5t plus 7, this is still the slope, but instead of this being called the y-intercept, since they have r by itself, it would be called the r-intercept. That's all they're trying to get you to see. All right, next thing that that I assigned are these two problems about what's called intercept form. Now, a neat little trick here on these two particular problems is that if I had an equation like x over 4 plus y over 6 equals 1, when it's written that way, this number that's underneath the x, that is the x-intercept. It would be at 4, 0. And this number that's underneath the y, that is the y-intercept, and that would be at 6, 0. So they have this little application problem about, all right, how would you write something in general form, like if I had 4x minus 3y minus 12 is 0, how would you get that in intercept form? Well, the trick would be, you'll notice this intercept form, you have x and y all set equal to 1. So that's really the trick. So like on this problem, you'd move the negative 12 over, and then you want this to be equal to 1, so you would divide everything by 12. So you would have x over 3 minus y over 4 equals 1. Now, the little trick of this is that this needs to be plus in the middle to have this to do right. So remember, 9 minus 6 in arithmetic is the same as saying 9 plus a negative 6. So I'm going to say this is plus negative y over 4. And then I'm going to move that negative to the bottom, and then I have it right. And the only advantage of doing it this way is that you can look at it and immediately know the x and y intercepts. So that's how you're going to do 55. And then on 56, once you get the, 55 is get the answer to look like that, and then 56 is just to tell me the intercepts. So that's kind of a challenge problem too, but you should be able to do it. It's not that hard. All right, the last thing I need to show you, you're going to be asked to do 49 and 50, where they tell you about a telephone call. Well, to show you how to do those, I'm going to do 49, 46, 47, and 48. And what they're going to do in the telephone problem is they're going to tell you that a 4-minute call is $2.65, and then a 10-minute call is $4.75. Well, you've got to write a linear equation to model that. Okay, well, how do you do it? All right, well, I'm going to show you with Celsius and Fahrenheit. So over here, we have that 0 degrees Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? We all know that. And then 100 degrees Celsius is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you did not know the handy-dandy formula to change from Celsius to Fahrenheit, you could figure it out by learning what we've done Friday and today. So the first thing you do is you do the slope formula, which would be, if I'm doing 0, 32 and 100, 212, that's going to be xy, xy, first and second. So that's going to be 212 minus 32, and then it's going to be 100 minus 0, so that's 180 over 100, so the slope is 1.8. Now, to get the equation, you could then do our y minus y1 formula. So my slope is 1.8, and then I'm going to choose to use 0.32 for my x1, y1. So it'd be y minus 32. I'm just plugging this y1 in here. Slope is 1.8, and then in x1 I'm going to plug 0. 1.8 times x would be 1.8x. 1.8 times 0 is 0, obviously. And then move the 32 over. And then I have the answer. But I've got to realize that in my problem, the y-coordinate is really Fahrenheit, and the x-coordinate is really Celsius. So it's Fahrenheit is 1.8 Celsius plus 32 degrees. And that's where that formula comes from. Now in math, you would have learned it that the 1.8 was like 9/5. They may have had you use a fraction instead, but it's the same difference. Now once you get that linear formula, then you can do some math. Like here, they want you to plug 20 degrees in. On your problem, they want to know how much would it cost to talk for half an hour. So once you get your equation, they're wanting to know, well, if you plug 30 in there, what would you get? So, I mean, it's pretty simple on finishing that. All right, so that's how you do 49 and 50. All right, so I have now shown you how to do all of homework number 8. So you should be good to go. Just remember, the key thing is you've got 2 formulas that you can use to get the equation of a line. You get to pick which one you want to do. But just remember, even though you have a choice to either use what I call method 1 point slope, or method 2, slope intercept. Half the time, you still have to use the old slope formula. So what that means is you've got to spend some time memorizing this because I'm not going to give you any of these formulas. So if there's time left in the period, you can take this time to work on homework some. Remember that homeworks 6 through 8 are going to be due Thursday.